Hey guys, so I know it has been a little bit since I have had a live chat. Been a little bit since I've had a live chat. I've been doing all this traveling the past few weeks, but life is finally getting back to normal. Hello, Smith Family Ranch. Good evening. So I know I look a little bit different. I actually have my glasses on tonight. I think I've probably only been on camera once or twice ever in my glasses over the years. But my eyes were tired and feeling irritated. And when they get like that, it's hard to see the screen. So I took out the contacts and put in the glasses. So that way I could see what everyone is saying.
Plus you cleaned out the chicken coop.
Yeah, and we cleaned out the chicken coop this evening, and that was a very dusty thing. So that's probably why my eyes feel so tired, because a lot of dust. We had to stand back several times and let it clear because we didn't think we're out of masks. We like to mask up when we do that normally, and I think we're out of them. We need to pick some more up. But how has your weekend been, Smith Family Ranch? Yeah. Don't like the cleaning part. Me either. Hello, Prairie Girl and Cowboy Homestead. Eva. Oh, great. Okay. So I went to a picnic today, kind of a Bible study fellowship picnic up on Monte Sano, which is a little mountain in Huntsville. There's a beautiful state park up there. And so we had a nice time. Hello, Julia. Welcome. Went to the TCU Longhorns game in Fort Worth, met some old friends for dinner last night, and then drove 2.5 hours home. Got home at midnight last night. Whew, long drive. But that's always nice, getting to meet up with old friends. Hello, Off Kilter Homestead. Montana is cold and more snow coming in. I imagine so. It actually got pretty nippy here in Alabama the past few days. We've had our first frost this past week. Just a very mild one, so nothing to affect the plants yet. Just that kind of frost that you get on cold, hard surfaces. Yes, it was a very nice weekend. Yesterday, we didn't do a whole lot. Just kind of hung around the house because it was absolutely pouring yesterday. Yeah. You probably can't hear Mr. Smith in the living room, but he said we did drop a yote, though. He did. He had stepped outside, and I was in the kitchen cooking, doing something, and he hollered, "Grab the rifle!" because there was a coyote out there. As soon as the rain stopped, here came the coyote, and so he took care of it. Mr. Smith 1, coyote 0, and the chickens are safe another day, and the ducks. But otherwise, yesterday was pretty uneventful. Just a lot of rain, a lot of sideways rain. So we needed it. Alabama still is, I think, under a deficit as far as the year goes.
Yeah, severe drought for Northeast Alabama.
Mm-hmm. Northeast Alabama is still under drought. Yeah, we hear them a lot more often than we see them. We don't see them very often. We do get them on camera. They'll come around usually at night. It tends to be the younger ones that'll come out during broad daylight, just because they're not old enough to have the sense not come around, I think. And so this was kind of a younger one, not like a pup or whatever they call. Do they call coyote babies
I
pups?
think they call them kits.
Kits, yes.
Young female.
It was a young female. So if you're gonna get one, he said the same thing yesterday. He's like, that's the one you want to get because that's the one that's gonna multiply. We do not have any experience with tanning. We haven't done it ourselves, so we just dispose of the carcass. Alabama actually has a thing going on right now because the coyote population is so intense that currently there's actually a bounty on coyotes. So if
$40 a dog.
yeah, $40 per. So if you wanted to go that route, we could have actually turned it into the game warden, gotten paid for it, but I don't really want to mess with that. They said, good job, Mr. Smith. He says. Yeah, they don't do that all the time. I think they just reinstated that. Was it this year that they started doing that? Yeah, it was just this year that they announced that, just because they've gotten so bad. My cousin used a yote bounty as a part-time job in high school. Well, that would be a good hobby and pay for it. Yeah, it's just tanning is just not something we've ever really tried to do. I've thought about it in the past. Well, when I got my very first deer, we kind of kept the hide, and I was wanting to try and tan it, but then we never got a chance to. And the kids were young then, and I was homeschooling, and Mr. Smith was deploying left and right, and so I would have liked to have, but yeah. Steve Ranella says yote tastes just like beef, and I'm not willing to try. Oh, I don't think I could try that. We mentioned in a chat a while back, we have a friend who tried bobcat, and I said, I think I'd have to be starving to do that, because bobcat looks too much like my pets, and I think coyotes might fall into that category too. I can't see myself trying that. Now, survival situation, all bets are off, but yeah. But we haven't lost any more ducks or chickens in a little while. Knock on wood. We were losing those ducks left and right, and we were down to the one duck in the front garden with Edith. Every morning, the first thing I do is look out the window and see if they're both still out there. But the other two ducks that had come from the neighbors are still doing great. They still sleep with the chickens every night in the chicken coop. So I think they're safe for the most part. And they tend to stick around the house and the garden, barn area, so they stick a little bit close. Now the chickens like to wander all the way down to the woods and go into the tree line right around dusk. So they're not the wisest creatures, but I don't think we've lost any of them recently either. We're sticking somewhere right around 21, 22 full-size hens, and I don't think we've lost any of them in a while. We lost a silky a while back, but I don't think we've lost any chickens since then. So I was thinking about it. This is our third year, or we've been here at the homestead now for 3 years. One moment. I have to cut a thread.
I got to call him Briar.
Oh, I see that. Well, I hope it don't make a hole. So we've been here on the homestead for 3 years. We're working on our 4th year now. Hello, Peggy. Welcome. Oh, thank you. I got this hat at the Homesteaders of America conference, if you didn't see that video. And this came from Farm Life Outfitters. They're the ones that make that. So I couldn't resist a little chicken because it kind of looks like my logo a little bit. Just needs a little spoon down there. Hello, Stephanie. Yeah, so this is the third year, and I realized I had it kind of marked on the calendar a while back that we had a little bit of a memorable thing that was happening, because as an adult married to Mr. Smith and moving all over the place every so often with Army life and all that, we had never lived in any house more than 2 years and 11 months. That is the longest we had ever been in one house. And that was our military housing here at Redstone Arsenal. And so back in April, we passed that marker, and officially we have been here in the homestead longer than had then been in our homestead here longer than any house we'd ever lived in over the years. So that was kind of a big deal. Hello, Sarah. Hello, Mary Alice. Welcome. Hello, Kay Dean from upstate New York. I say that to Mr. Smith because he still talks about moving up there. I ain't moving. Okay, honey. He's putting up the chickens. So I got to thinking about that, and having been here for 3 years and looking back and thinking if there's anything I would have done differently now that I've been here, that we've been here for 3 years. And I think the one thing I would probably have done a little bit differently was really the full-sized chicken coop. When I built it, I used the designs for a shed, and I shortened the walls and I lifted it up off the ground so that it was elevated, and I put it up on cinder blocks. And I did that so that the chickens would have some place where they could find some shade, because we don't, up here around the house and the chicken coop and everything, there's really no trees. And so there's no shade, and it being Alabama, being the South, it gets quite hot in the summer. And so I had lifted the chicken coop up off the ground, and there's about 2 feet or so underneath there. Hello, Bonnie from Florida. And I think I did a pretty good job at building the chicken coop. My dad actually made a comment once that my poppy, my maternal grandfather, would have been pretty proud of me for building that coop. He was a carpenter, and it was funny that he had told me that, because I had kind of wondered if my grandfather would have been impressed that I did it, or if he'd have been rolling in his grave, because nothing was quite square and nothing was quite perfect, but it all kind of worked. So I just kind of wondered what he would think about it. So it kind of was special to me that my dad said that. But there are some things I would have done different with that chicken coop. Hindsight 2020, my number one mistake, first of all, was by putting it on the cinder blocks. Well, it's okay that it goes on cinder blocks, but I stood the cinder blocks up on end. I had never built anything like that before. I had no idea. And no sooner did we get our first major storm come through, and the whole thing just kind of tilted a little bit. And so I was afraid that one night I would come out here and find the chicken coop blown over. And so I went and got a whole bunch of cinder blocks and cap blocks and everything, and I put it right up all underneath there, so if those ones that it was standing on went over, it would only go like a couple inches. So yeah, that was one kind of oops that, you live and you learn. Hindsight's always 2020. Oh yes, the chickens are molting. Oh gosh, many of ours are molting really bad too. I always joke. I say they look like they've been in a fight with a lawnmower. They look really rough. Cooking dinner at the same time. I'm from Western New York. It is too cold in the winter. I'm glad we live in Texas. Yeah, it does get cold up there. Let's see, square and level isn't important. As long as it looks halfway straight, you're good. It looks halfway straight. I'll give it that. Nope, and chickens don't care about perfect. They sure don't. The other thing that I would have done differently, though, with that chicken coop is I think I would have gone ahead and made it the full height, because I made the walls. What did I cut them down to? I want to say I made the walls like 5 feet tall. No, maybe it wasn't even that. Maybe I made the sides 4 feet tall. I'm talking about the short sides where the roof comes down. And I think it would have been much better if I'd have just left it the full height that it was supposed to be. I think it was 8 at the peak and 6 on the sides is what it should have been. And I made it 6 and 4. That sounds about right. The major reason is because it is not easy to get inside that chicken coop. You've really got to hunch over if you've got to go inside there. And that was definitely a hindsight 2020 situation. You know, I was thinking about raising it up for the chickens to get under there. I don't know why it didn't dawn on me that I can just keep it the full height and still do that. Well, I take that back. I do remember why. The reason I didn't do it full height was because I didn't know if I could reach the top to do the roofing. That's what it was. See, now it's all coming back to me, because I built it by myself. I did it completely by myself. Mr. Smith was in Saudi Arabia on a contract, and as it is, it was a little nerve-wracking doing that roof up there, because I had to basically lay on top of the roof to attach everything, because there was parts you just could not reach with the ladder. And yeah, I don't know if I could have done it if it was full size. That's why I did it. But now, looking back, I wish I'd have just gotten a taller ladder and been able to make it the full height, because it is kind of a pain to go inside. Yeah, I'm not the greatest with heights. Smith Family Ranch. I mean, going up in tall buildings, things like that don't bother me whatsoever, but being out in the open where I could fall does give me a little bit of a hesitation. Yeah, Prairie Girl's not a builder, but Cowboy is. Yeah, you know, I don't build anything super, super fancy. I mean, when I built the chicken coop, I actually bought this kit that has these metal brackets. And so you didn't have to cut any angles. It was all right angles, and it worked. It made it very easy. You basically just stuck in the 2x4s, screwed it in place, and it created all of the angles for you. Now, I did venture into the angle cutting and all that when I built the little scrappy coop that was literally made out of scrap wood and stuff. So that was kind of like my next stepping stone. Thank you, Mary Alice. I bought that at a little bit of a craft fair not too long ago, and I just loved the colors in it. She's talking about the wreath back there. So then when I built the chicken sled, that's where I really ventured into being able to cut angles. But I went and I went and bought a miter saw so that I could do that properly, because up to then, all I had was a skill saw. Skill saw? I guess that's what they're called. The big old loud saw. I didn't have anything that was stable and well, you know, good for doing angles. So other than a hand saw miter box, and yeah, that's just too much. I try my darndest, but we're off kilter for a reason. That sounds good. I'm not fond of ladders myself. I did make myself proud this week, climbing a ladder to caulk around our windows as husband followed behind painting. Good job, Julia. Yep, sometimes you just got to do what you got to do. Yeah, so that is, looking back, the big chicken coop is probably the one thing that it's kind of like, if I could do that over, I would do it this way, sort of thing. But at this point, now that I've figured out how to do that chicken sled, if you guys haven't seen that, maybe you're new to my channel, I have a chicken coop that I built that is essentially self-cleaning. It's an A-frame coop. It's got a hardware cloth type of floor, and you just move it, and all of the droppings, everything just falls through, and every time you move it, it's on fresh ground. And so it's basically self-cleaning. And I kind of came up with that idea last year, and I love it. There's very little I have to do with it. I mean, it is heavy, so I pull it with the truck or the tractor. But I absolutely, that's my favorite coop. And if I ever build another coop in the future, it'll be exactly the same as that one. And I have the plans. I actually measured everything out very carefully and drew up plans, and I put it on my blog so other people could make it if they wanted to, because I've never seen anything quite like that anywhere else. Just remember, falling doesn't hurt. It's the stopping that does. Yes. Yes. I think Mr. Smith would probably agree. He was airborne for a while, and it is the stopping that doesn't feel good. Let's see. What are all the uses for a loofah plant? I know you have some nice looking ones. Mostly, well, the young loofahs can actually be eaten. You can use them just like you would squash. You can cut them up and saute them. You can make them into soup. They're very edible. You can find all sorts of recipes using loofah gourds, young loofah gourds. But once they get bigger and more fibrous, they're mainly used for the scrubbing. And there's a couple of different uses. So, I mean, of course, you can use them in the shower as like an exfoliant. But a lot of people use them for scrubbing their dishes. I know people have used them for years and years, and they just love them that way. I've never used them in the kitchen, but now that I've got plenty, and hopefully I get, you know, enough of those that can dry and the weather cooperates and all that, I'll definitely experiment with it and give it a try. Let's see. Do you deal with bumblefoot on that hardware cloth at all? We have not. I have not had any issues with it, but I will say that the roosts that we have in that A-frame chicken sled aren't terribly high. So I think if they were much higher off the ground, maybe that would be an issue. But ours are, now I would have to go back and look at the measurements. But I want to say that those roosts are maybe 2 feet off the ground or off of the floor of the coop. So at this point, I've never had a case of bumblefoot ever with any of my chickens over the years, whether it's the chickens here or the flocks that we had years ago when we were still military, when we had the blessing of having some places that we could live and have chickens. I've never had that happen. So I know that is a possibility when you have a hardware cloth floor, but I'm hoping that because it isn't high, it's not a huge impact on them when they jump down. Get a little tongue-tied there. Let's see, Mary Ellis. Tomorrow I hook up the electric dog water for my chickens. Yes, let's see. We also do a lot of other prepping. We even built a root cellar this summer. Oh, I'm so jealous. I'm so jealous that you have a root cellar. I've talked about in the past, I would love to have a root cellar here, but I don't know how I could build one. Our water table is so high that I think it would just turn into a swamp inside there. I don't know that we have the ability to do that because we don't have, our property is so flat. Now it slopes down where it goes down into the woods and down to the creek, but up here it's totally flat. So there's really nowhere to build one. So I'll just have to be jealous of everyone else's. Matter of fact, our property is up here around the house is actually slightly more than flat in that it is ever so slightly concave. And underneath our topsoil and everything, it's super hard clay, especially when we haven't had rain. And so when we get a bunch of rain all of a sudden, it's almost like our house is in a plate, just an ever so slight concave. And so it takes a little bit for it to drain out. I actually, back in the spring, went out there with a shovel and dug a trench from the barn area, our shed, out past the chicken coop to help it drain out. And it was like a stream running down through there. We need to rent or borrow like a little backhoe or something and like actually dig a ditch so that can properly drain out of there. Ooh, Mary Alice, we got a buck Wednesday. Hubby uses the crossbow, spent the day processing. That's a lot of work. Yes, it is. Last year when I got my deer, Mr. Smith and Jack did the butchering. Well, what would you call it? The skinning and gutting and cutting into large portions. And then I did all the rest. I did the stew meat, the steaks, the roasts, all that stuff. And we vacuum sealed it and froze it all. But it is a lot of work. And the reason I did it is, well, Jack doesn't really know how to do that. And Mr. Smith was at work and it needed to be done. So, and it was my deer. So, it wasn't that big of a deal. But this year, I actually don't know if I'm going to hunt this year. We still have some venison in the freezer that we have not yet ate. And so it's kind of, well, Mr. Smith said I should. But my older son, our oldest son who's in the Army, is going to be coming here in November for 3 weeks for a visit. He's coming for Thanksgiving. So a week before Thanksgiving and 2 weeks after. And he wants to hunt while he's here. And if he hunts, then Jack is going to want to hunt too. And I just feel like we'll give them the chance to do it. We've got 2 tree stands out there, and I'll let them have the opportunity to do it. You know what I mean? I don't mind going a year without it. But I do hunt with a crossbow too. I think last year was my first year doing it with a crossbow. I really like that. In the past, I'd always hunted, of course, with a rifle. It's really fun doing it with that crossbow. Let's see. We have lots of wild turkeys here. Haven't tried one yet. Heard they can be tough. I have never had wild turkey either. Hello, Walterman Homestead. Welcome. We've got some wild turkeys around here too. We've heard them out there in the woods. Never laid eyes on them. We found some feathers out there.
A lot of tracks.
Yeah, a lot of tracks all back in there. But I've never had wild turkey. I'm still hoping that one of these days I'll have an opportunity to get one of those wild hogs or feral swine that come out of the woods once in a blue moon. But in that case, we would definitely have to do that ourselves, because there's not really around here. You can't take a swine that's already been dispatched to any of the butchers around here. So yeah, we would have to do it ourselves. So that would be an adventure, but I'd be up for it. I mean, I wouldn't pass that up. I have had wild boar before, or feral swine, whichever it was. Do you remember what it was when we went to that wild game cook-off?
Wild boar.
Wild boar?
Wild pig.
Yeah, some kind of wild pig. When we first moved here to Alabama, we were invited by our neighbors at the time to go down to a wild game cook-off down there in Montgomery. And we tried all sorts of things. And one of the things that somebody had there was a wild pig, wild hog, whatever dish, and it tasted like pork. I mean, it tasted like really good pork. It didn't have like a gamey taste or anything like that. It just tasted, it was good. I'll just say that. And I'm not a massive fan of things that taste gamey. Venison isn't actually my favorite. Mr. Smith, however. Oh, I don't need that, honey. Oh, okay. He loves venison. Yeah.
Best thing we ever had to do was doll sheep.
Oh, yeah. When we lived in Alaska, one of the pilots in his unit. No, not that.
Caribou. I traded caribou.
Oh, did you? One of his pilots had his own plane, and he flew up to the wilderness and got a doll sheep. And when they were getting ready to deploy to Iraq, he had some meat still in his freezer, and his wife didn't eat that stuff, and she was leaving. She was going down to stay with her family while they were gone. And so he gave it to us, and that doll sheep was absolutely delicious.
Super sweet.
Yeah, it had a sweet flavor to it. I'll send you plans for a great trap if you don't mind a little welding. I would love to see it. I've never welded, but I wouldn't mind taking a look at it. I did look on the first year that we lived here, and I saw the wild pigs, feral swine, on our game cameras. I did look up ways to trap them, and I want to say it was like Mississippi. It was an extension office out of Mississippi, had several different types of traps that you could build using cattle panels, and they looked really easy. It was basically like cattle panels and T-posts, and it was just the way you shaped it. You created like this funnel sort of thing, and that's how you trapped them. It was pretty neat. But here in Alabama, so I mentioned you can't take a swine that has already been dispatched to any kind of butcher, but you also cannot transport a live one anywhere if it's a feral swine. So it's kind of, if you get one of those, you have to butcher it yourself here in the state of Alabama. So I would probably be looking up stuff maybe about Hand Hewn Farm because they do some amazing workshops and stuff. They have a lot of things online. Maybe I'd have to do a little research on that. Some deer and antelope taste like sagebrush here. Some are good. When we lived in Alaska, Mr. Smith got 2 different moose while we were there. And the first moose that we got was at the end, towards the end of winter. And
February.
Yeah, it was February. Yeah. And that moose was so tough. It literally, you couldn't chew it. I had a roast that I had done in the crock pot. I'd let it cook all day long. And dinner time, you couldn't cut it. And so we left it in the crock pot, let it continue to cook all night long. And the next day, you could cut it, but then you couldn't chew it. It was insane. Like, you would sit there, you put a piece in your mouth, and you would chew and you chew and chew and chew and just wait for it to start breaking down, but it never broke down. So that moose, we ended up turning the whole thing into ground meat.
The big thing about that one is when I killed it, we cleaned it out on the river, and then the snow machine ride back, it froze solid.
Oh, yeah.
The end of it froze solid.
Yeah. It was very cold. But that moose had been eating, that far into winter up there in Alaska, the only thing for them to eat is like tree bark and twigs, and there's very little out there. But then the next year he got was opening day of moose season. It was September 1st, and when you're walking out there, everywhere you look is this low brush, and it's nothing but blueberries and cranberries and all this. So that moose had been eating all of that stuff, and that moose was tender. The meat was like sweet. It was.
That was a big bull.
Yeah, that was a big bull. The first one was a cow, and then this one was a big bull, and so it's, some deer and antelope tasting like one thing, and some of them tasting good probably has a lot to do with whatever it is they're eating, because I know that sure affected those moose.
And then that caribou I got, that was real good.
Yeah, now the caribou, he got a caribou within, it was like 2 weeks of the moose. We had meat coming out of our ears. We had to go get another freezer. We had 3 freezers full of meat.
Moose,
and
caribou. We had salmon, halibut.
Yeah, salmon, halibut. But it was amazing, though, that even though the caribou was also in the middle of winter, that meat was actually very good, but definitely not moose in the winter. Perfect learning project. I'll even tell you where you can get free steel. You can't transport a hog in Florida either. Yeah, I would imagine, just because, states like Florida and Alabama and probably Mississippi, we have such an issue with the wild feral swine. Yeah, there's diseases.
CWD with deer.
Yeah. So it makes sense that you can't move them, because, they don't want you trying to move it, and then now it's somewhere else, and it's someone else's problem. Oh, Hickory's over there begging for treats. Oh, goodness. But yeah, I did love venison's not my favorite. Now, I do like venison when it's cooked like in stews and chili, things that have a lot of seasoning to them and have a lot of added flavor. But I'm not a fan. Mr. Smith likes to take the backstrap and cut it into the little medallions and just, sear it with a little bit of butter and salt and pepper. He loves that. I let him enjoy that, because that's just, you can have those, honey. I love you. Yeah, but I do like the venison in well-seasoned things. But man, moose, so good. We just used that like we did beef. I have a friend who still talks about the moose meatloaf that I cooked for him when he came up there to visit. Well, he didn't come to visit. He was up there for work, but I cooked dinner for him every night. And so.
Well, that bull we killed.
When
we turned it all in, because they cut it with pork fat or beef fat. We ended up getting almost 600 pounds of meat back.
Yeah.
And then we split it, 4 ways?
Yeah, the moose, the first moose we did ourselves. That was a lot of work. So the next moose we took to a butcher who did it all for us, and that was 600 pounds of meat that came back from the butcher, from that one moose. Yeah, there's a lot of wild hogs here too. I don't think they're as bad in our particular area of Alabama. We have them. I've seen them on camera. I've seen one with my eyes, but we don't have a huge population of them in this county, at least. I know further south in the state, there's a lot of them.
What's that?
Wild hogs. Hello, Ma Bell. Yes, I was talking about, we started talking about deer, and then I got on to talking about moose and caribou and just comparing the different meats. Oh, yeah, elk is very good. I've had elk a few times. When we went to that wild game cook-off, I had a few things I had never had before, like alligator, elk, the wild hog. What else did I have? There was something else I had that I'd never had before. Oh, rabbit. I had rabbit for the first time. Seems like there was something else. I'm not sure. But we have a restaurant here in our area in Madison. I don't know if I've mentioned it before, but all they serve. Now they do have some like traditional meats, like you can get a hamburger, but they do all sorts of wild game. We've had alligator there. I had an elk burger there. Mr. Smith had, what did you have?
Yak.
Yak. He had a yak burger, and Jack had a kangaroo burger. So they've got all sorts of exotic stuff there. Yeah, it is very lean. So was the caribou and the moose. I have a doe and some axes to go pick up at the locker plant, and I can't wait to eat that meat. Oh. Mr. Smith just said he hates you. Oh, have a good evening off Kilter Homestead. Oh, her first time having elk was in Quebec at a great resort. Yeah, I don't remember when the first time I had the elk.
We had bison.
Yeah.
Going up to Alaska.
Yeah, on our way up to Alaska, when we were traveling up the Alaska Highway, there was this little restaurant in the middle of nowhere. Was it in the Yukon?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was in the Yukon. And someone had told us at the last town that we had been in that when we get to mile marker such and such to look for this restaurant and have the bison burgers. And it was so funny because we stopped, we had just eaten lunch, so it wasn't really the right timing, but we did stop and we got one burger and we cut it into 5 pieces. So each of us had a chance to try it, and it was very good. I think that was the first time I'd ever had bison. It was. And as we get back on the road and we're driving up the road, no joke, I'm sitting here eating my piece of burger and munching on it thinking, this is really good. And as I'm chewing, we passed by bison.
They're going down both sides of the road.
Yeah, going both down on both sides of the road, hundreds of them everywhere. It was amazing. I'm like, well, we know where they get them from. The children I used to babysit asked their mother why her barbecue chicken did not taste like Mrs. Dean. I never told them it was rabbit. Saw a turkey running along a city street last week. It was funny to see among traffic. I'd say it was. So Katie and I have a good friend who used to raise rabbits, and her husband was squeamish about the idea of it. And her son was squeamish about the idea of it, but her daughter thought it was good. And so she had a deal with her husband that she would just cook it and she wouldn't tell him what it was. But the daughter would say, is it hopping chicken or flopping chicken? And so she would tell the daughter which kind of chicken it was, but she wouldn't tell anybody else. And as long as they didn't know which one it was, they were fine with it. So, yeah. Yeah, bison is very good. And nowadays, you can, of course, find it just about anywhere. And I will buy that. Well, actually, when we lived in Alaska, it was the best quality ground beef that I could buy. And anytime I bought ground beef, I bought the bison instead. And, of course, until we got the moose and I had the ground moose. And then when we moved back down here, I used bison quite a bit. Of course, I've got access now to grass-fed beef from a local farm, and so I get the ground beef from them. But yeah, bison is very good. Mom would trick us with rabbit. I could tell because the bones are much harder. That is true. If you can see the bones, you can definitely tell the difference. But I know I cooked some chili one night. I made a white chili, and I just, all you had in there was the meat. There were no bones or anything. And I didn't tell Jack what it was. I just said, dinner's done. And he came out, got a great big bowl and ate it. And I didn't tell him for a long time that was actually rabbit, because he swore up and down that wild rabbit is delicious but that there was something about the rabbits that we raised, he could tell the difference and he didn't like it. So I made white chili and he thought it was chicken. I never said it was chicken. I just said dinner's done. So yeah, if there's no bones, yeah, he was hungry. But yeah, I mean, if there's no bones, you can't hardly tell the difference. I mean, you really can't. It just depends on where you cook it. Sarah Large, where do you get your ground beef? I need to get a good place. There is in Danville, because I live in Hartsville, Alabama. And over in Danville, there's a farm called DSR Farms, and they go to a lot of farmers markets around the area, and they sell meats. And originally, they started with things like chicken and rabbits and quail, and they've slowly expanded. They started doing pork, and then they initially just started with ground beef, but over time, I think they've been adding more to it. And so I would get it from the farmers markets, but they do actually have, the last time I went by there, they still had a little store at their actual farm, and you can go and get it there. And they also have things like raw milk and other goodies, and lots of eggs. Of course, I don't eat eggs because I've got my own chickens. But I will tell you this, though, it is not cheap meat, because everything is pastured. So it costs more to raise animals that way. And yeah, but it's very good. You can tell the difference between the meat that you get that's raised that way as opposed to just your typical grocery store meat. My family said they did not like liver, but loved my meatloaf, and it had liver in it. Yeah, it's funny how things taste differently when you prepare them in an unusual way, especially something like meatloaf, because that's a good way of hiding things in it. I will say I've only ever had liver once in my life. I did not like it. Of course, I was a kid, and it was funny because my dad had eaten something one time, and he had given me a bite of it, and I thought it was delicious. And he told me it was liver. And later on, I think he was pulling my leg. I think he just told me it was liver, because then not long after that, we went out to dinner at this restaurant, and it was this kind of quaint little mom and pop place in Beloit, Wisconsin, called the Toot and Tell. It had like a little car on the sign and all this stuff, and they had meatloaf or liver. And I ordered the liver, and my mom's like, "Oh, you don't want that? You don't like liver?" I'm like, "Yes, I do. Dad gave me liver and I liked it." Well, after much insisting, they let me get the liver. Yeah, I didn't like it. So that's why I think my dad must have been pulling my leg. He must have had something altogether different and just told me it was liver. He's sneaky that way sometimes. He likes to joke. Yeah, I don't remember how much their milk is. That's not something, it being raw milk, they can't really advertise it or anything like that, because in the state of Alabama, while you can sell raw milk, it has to be considered pet food. Whether you drink that or not is up to you. Just saying. Anyways, the whole raw milk thing is kind of your own. Yeah, you decide for yourself is the way I see it. Hello, Plain Speaker. Hello, Patricia. Yeah, I don't know. For all I know, my dad could have actually been letting me taste liver, and maybe that restaurant just didn't make it well. I don't know. I was probably 5 years old at the time, so who knows? Who knows? I just remember the incident, and I remember it being at the Toot and Tell. We used to go there quite often. I don't know if it's still around anymore, though, that restaurant. but it was kind of like a landmark sort of place back in the day. Yeah, I don't think I've ever had liver any other time. Thank you, Mabel. Oh, are you coming to say hello, Shotzi? Say hello. The little man. Don't lick me. Don't lick me. Don't lick me. Yeah, depends on how it's cooked. That's me and venison. Like I said, I like it when it's well seasoned and in things, but not a fan of it just being by itself. Oh, Patricia. Oh, hello, T&S Dog and Dragonfly Farm. That's a cute name. I've noticed your thumb ring is gone. What happened? I still have it. I don't know. I had taken it off for a while just for the heck of it. And it's funny because I was just thinking about that today. I'm like, I gotta put my, hey, stop. The dogs are getting wound up. Nothing happened to it. I just have it. I still have it. Just kind of felt like taking it off for a bit. But like I said earlier today, I was thinking, oh, I should put my ring back on. So you'll probably see it again here before too long. Oh, thank you, Mabel. He's our little stinker because he can crawl underneath the gate for the chickens for the kitchen. And the other dogs can't get underneath it. Oh goodness. Well, it is 6:57, so I think we will go ahead and wrap up this chat for this evening. I think the dogs need to get let out anyways because we've got a wrestling match happening in the living room. Hello, Bright Eyes. Oh, stay safe. Stay safe. Hold on. Hey, come on. Go outside. Come on, Maniac. Let's go. Go. Goodness. Yeah, stay safe out there. I know it's California and those fires it's a pretty rough situation out there. Keep us updated on how you're doing. But yes, we will go ahead and wrap this up. Thanks for joining me again tonight. We're getting back into the regular routine, so there should be a Sunday live chat every Sunday once again. The travel is done for a good long while, at least for the foreseeable future. So, all right. Well, I'll be keeping you in my prayers, Bright Eyes. All right. Have a good night, you guys. You'll probably see me over there if you follow the Roots and Refuge live chat. I'll probably be over there in a little bit. And have a great week. Talk to y'all next time.
Good.